There are about 107 million gun owners in the United States. In our hypothetical, 80% of them answer the call. That's roughly 85 million people, organized into basic local militia groups with simple leadership and a chain of command. Zero jets or tanks, but plenty of guns, gear, and home field advantage. They're bringing everything they legally own, which in America is a lot. AR-15s, 50 cals that can punch holes in light armor, night vision, body armor, suppressors. Something like 400 to 500 million total firearms between them. Most of these people are not trained soldiers. They're farmers, accountants, truck drivers, and teachers who own guns. Yes, some are veterans. Some are hunters with real field skills, but most are not. And that does matter. What they do have is numbers so large that even a small percentage of capable fighters represents a force bigger than most professional armies on this list. All right, let's go. Jamaica. 5,950 troops. Jamaica's military is about 5,950 people. British trained, disciplined, and genuinely professional. The issue isn't their quality, it's what they're actually equipped to do. They have no tanks, no fighter jets, no artillery, and a total military budget of around $308 million. Getting an invasion force across the Caribbean requires ships, fuel, air cover, none of which Jamaica has at any meaningful scale. Even if they landed, 5,950 soldiers spread across American territory would be isolated and overwhelmed in dozens of towns simultaneously. Jamaica doesn't have the tools for this fight. Chance of US gun owners winning, 99%. Ireland, 7,767 troops. Ireland has about 7,767 active soldiers, experienced from decades of UN peacekeeping. Genuinely professional, but Ireland's military is built for peacekeeping, not for projecting power across an ocean into a continental scale fight. Zero combat aircraft. Air defense is outsourced to the British RAF. Naval vessels aren't armed for offensive operations. Defense spending at 0.3% of GDP, lowest in the EU. Any Irish force landing in America arrives with no air support, no armor, and a supply line stretched across the Atlantic that sustained resistance would sever. Professional infantry without air or armor that far from home gets ground down fast when the other side fights indefinitely from their own front door. Chance of US gun owners winning, 99%. Switzerland, 19,550 troops. Switzerland changes the picture. Leopard 2 tanks, FA-18 fighters, modern air defense, and a militia system that can mobilize 147,000 trained personnel. Their entire military doctrine is built around fighting a numerically superior enemy from difficult terrain. The FA-18 is the key factor here. With precision-guided munitions, a single jet can locate and destroy a militia gathering point, a fuel stockpile, or a communication hub before ground forces ever engage. Gun owners can fight infantry from cover, ambush supply covers, and melt back into civilian life. They cannot shoot down jets or stop airstrikes. The moment an invading force has air cover, the civilian militia loses its biggest tactical advantage: the ability to pick the time and place of every engagement. What keeps gun owners in it is logistics. Switzerland doesn't own the ships to move Leopard 2 tanks across the Atlantic. They'd be chartering civilian cargo vessels, slow and easy to disrupt before they unload. And those jets need a runway on American soil to operate from. Fighter jets can't fly sorties from Switzerland to the US and back. The moment gun owners make every major airport in the landing zone unusable, the air advantage disappears. Switzerland runs out of war before it can solve these problems. Chance of US gun owners winning? 75%. Sweden, 25,600 troops. Sweden is the most capable air power on this list so far. Since joining NATO in 2024 and rearming after Ukraine, they're now at around $16 billion a year. JAS-39 Gripen jets, Leopard 2 tanks, Patriot air defense, Archer howitzers. Unlike Switzerland, Swedish Gripen pilots train specifically to take on Russia, suppressing air defenses, hitting targets under fire, sustaining sorties in a contested environment. That's a more dangerous air campaign than anything Switzerland brings. Same wall though. no amphibious fleet to move Leopard 2s across the Atlantic, and Gripens need a captured US airbase to operate from. Without one, they're burning fuel flying from Sweden to the American coast and back. Sweden wins every fight it can actually reach. The problem is reaching them. Chance of US gun owners winning, 72%. Cuba, 49,000 troops. Cuba has 49,000 soldiers and a $129 million defense budget, less than many US county sheriff departments spend in a year. More critically, Cuba's Air Force has functionally lost all fixed-wing combat capability. A handful of aging MiGs technically exist on paper, but lack of parts and chronic fuel shortages mean they have zero operational fighters for anything sustained. What Cuba actually has is smart asymmetric doctrine built over 60 years of preparing to resist a US invasion. Dispersed command structures, hardened tunnel networks, militias embedded in civilian populations. On Cuban soil, with Cuban infrastructure and prepared positions, that's genuinely effective. Crossing the Florida Straits without air cover or a resupply chain, landing on a coast defended by millions of armed people, is a different problem entirely. Without jets to suppress resistance or protect a beachhead, they get chewed apart before establishing anything worth holding. Chance of US gun owners winning, 88%. Venezuela, 123,000 troops. The 123,000 number is misleading. Venezuela's military has been hollowing out for years under economic collapse and political purges. Their air force has maybe 6 to 12 actually airworthy fighters, cannibalized from a larger fleet rusting under sanctions. In January 2026, US Special Ops captured Maduro with barely any Venezuelan military response. The clearest real-world signal of what the FAMB is actually worth under pressure. The soldiers who show up are dealing with low pay, chronic desertion, and equipment that barely functions at home. They'd be crossing the Caribbean with no air cover and no resupply chain into a country where people can reload from their own gun safes. Venezuela's experience with messy urban fighting keeps this from being a complete blowout, but the gap between 123,000 degraded troops and 85 million armed defenders is too wide to close. Chance of US gun owners winning, 85%. Greece, 142,700 troops. This is where it gets genuinely difficult for gun owners. Greece spends over 3% of GDP on defense, $7.4 billion a year, one of the highest ratios in NATO. Rafale fighters, Leopard 2A6 tanks, Patriot air defense batteries, a submarine fleet, 142,700 active troops backed by 289,000 trained reserves. Each Rafale carries up to 9 tons of precision weapons with a combat range over 1,000 miles. Greece can systematically destroy any concentration of gun owners large enough to matter, hit supply lines, and degrade communications before a single Greek soldier engages on the ground. You can hide from an infantry patrol. You cannot hide a fuel depot or an ammunition cache from a Rafale with a targeting pod. The counter is that 85 million people don't need to mass. Dispersed, small unit guerrilla pressure across a continent-sized country is exactly what broke the Soviets in Afghanistan and the US in Vietnam. And those Rafales need a runway on American soil. Without a captured and secured airbase, they cannot operate over the continental US at all. If gun owners keep every major airport in the landing zone unusable, Greece's biggest advantage gets neutralized on day one. Greece's ground forces are real. Their air power is lethal if they can base it forward, and this is genuinely close. Chance of US gun owners winning, 55%. Mexico, 387,000 troops. Mexico doesn't have a single tank and only a handful of aging F-5 fighter jets. What they do have is 63 T-6C Texan II light attack aircraft, armed with rockets and laser-guided weapons, plus dozens of armed Black Hawk helicopters with miniguns and rocket pods. Specifically built for the kind of counterinsurgency warfare this would actually be. On paper, that sounds weak against a conventional army. In practice, this is the most dangerous matchup on the list, and the reason is geography. There's a 2,000-mile land border, no ocean to cross, no logistics chain to break. Mexican troops and supplies come from home continuously. The Mexican military has spent years fighting heavily armed cartels across the same deserts, border cities, and mountain terrain that runs up into the American Southwest. They know that environment in a way no other army on this list does. Gun owners push back hard inland. Millions of people in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California are armed and motivated. And sheer mass makes a full advance north unsustainable. But Mexico doesn't need a full advance. Controlling the border region, bleeding American resources, and forcing a grinding war of attrition on the southern flank is a realistic goal with their numbers and geography. Neither side wins cleanly, but gun owners have just enough home depth to outlast it. Chance of US gun owners winning? 62%. Want to see what happens if the Civil War started now? That video is right there on screen. Thanks for watching.